Joseph Vissarionovich Zhugaishvili, known as Stalin, Man of Steel, was born on December the 21st, 1879 in Gori, Georgia. During his childhood, he suffered humiliations, hardships and blows dealt to him by his father, a brawling drunkard of a cobbler filled with aspirations, but whose dreams were frustrated by reality. His mother managed to solve the many problems of a family with little financial resources, working as a laundress. Conscious as he was of the low rung of society where he was placed, Joseph, the only son remaining of 4 children who died in early childhood, was filled with resentment towards the rich and the local squires, who had all the feudal privileges. His mother had a future as a priest in mind for Joseph, so at the age of 9, she sent him to the parish school in Gori and then to the seminary in Tiflis. Joseph lost no time in discovering that images quite different than liturgical ones were flashing through the minds of a large number of the boarders, and he enthusiastically adapted to the seminary's rebellious atmosphere. Love for the land of Georgia, hatred for the oppressive Russians, and hatred for all forms of repression, including that regarding the reading of banned books, Darwin, Mill and Chernyshevsky, was rampant. Nationalism was therefore the aspiring rebels' first school. In the meantime, workers discovered their strength and organized the first strikes under the flag of the new socialist and Marxist ideals. The double life of the seminarian revolutionary came to an end when he was expelled from the seminary. All traces of Joseph were lost for many months. He reappeared to organize the 1901 May Day festivities, but the omnipresent Tsarist police forced him to flee. He sought refuge with complacent friends, where he met a sweet girl, Keke, who was to become his first wife. The atmosphere was becoming increasingly inflamed. Strikes and bloody demonstrations multiplied. On April the 5th, 1902, Joseph, who had taken on the nickname of Koba, the Caucasian hero, was arrested for the first time and deported, but he was able to escape. The Workers' Social Democratic Party ratified its irreparable fracture into 2 parts, extremists and the wary, Lenin versus Martov. The Leninist faction took the name of Bolsheviks, or that is to say, members of the majority, whereas the faction in favor of Martov was called Mensheviks, members of the minority. Joseph joined the Leninist faction and started to draw attention to himself. (1905) was the year of the revolution, when the Tsarists' guards fired on the crowd. It was an open revolt, and the Tsar's regime was shaky, but the first revolution soon started to die out, and the government resumed its bloody repression. The Bolsheviks reacted by organizing guerrilla warfare, but enormous sums of money were needed in order to continue the struggle. The so-called expropriations started, armed robberies, striking banks, the transport of valuables, and arms depots. The proceeds from the robberies, down to the last ruble, were deposited in the party's coffers. Joseph was arrested in March 1908 and was sent into exile for 1 year. The same thing happened in 1910. 2 years later, he escaped from prison and was able to reach Petrograd, where he contributed to the establishment of the newspaper Pravda. Arrests and escapes followed one another. Joseph became Stalin by adopting the pseudonym that Lenin personally proposed. The resolute man of action's prestige grew within the party, and he was also recognized as being an excellent theorist. In 1913, Stalin was once again arrested and deported to Siberia.
Homem!
1914, Germany declared war against Russia. The Tsar left for the front with the blessing of the Orthodox Church. The Russian soldiers, poorly fitted out and poorly armed, fell in thousands on the battlefields. Stalin followed the war from his exile. His revolutionary work was somewhat placated by the Siberian cold. The Russian army suffered one defeat after another, and the situation at the front worsened from one day to the next. Desperate because of the absurd massacres of the war and famine, in February 1917, the women of St. Petersburg took to the streets demanding bread. Workers came out of the workshops shouting, "Stop the war!" In 1917, there were two revolutions. The Democratic Revolution in February, which overthrew the Tsarist autocracy and gave Russia basic civil, political and trade union liberties for the first time, and the Communist Revolution in October, which, within a very short time, abolished those liberties. Stalin arrived in Petrograd, the former St. Petersburg, and ran into disconcerting political ideological chaos. He took over management of Pravda and started a cautious conciliatory policy. On the other hand, Lenin openly hurled abuse at the established government, calling it bourgeois. In his speeches to the people, he defined social democracy as a hybrid, and that power should be in the hands of the communists. And so, after attaining power, Lenin forced the dictatorship of the Communist Party on the former Russian Empire. He dissolved the Constituent Assembly with force. He brought the Soviets and trade unions under the dominion of the Communists. He banned all other parties. The social experiment commenced. Banks, factories and commerce were nationalized. He had redistributed the lands of the farmers, but immediately afterwards he demanded forced deliveries and requisitions of agricultural products and created the first collectivist structures. During the first communist government, Stalin was a member of the Council of Ministers, or, that is to say, of the People's Commissars. The new Free Russia acknowledged the right to independence of all oppressed peoples. On December the 18th, Stalin officially declared the independence of Finland from Russia. It was the first public act of the Soviet of nationalities. Internal chaos, famine, and a progressive lack of confidence in Bolshevikism were a few of the serious problems that threatened the Russian nation. A great many alarmed voices were raised to denounce the rift in the offing between the people and the ruling party. A large part of the country protested. Civil war raged in 1918. It was not only a savage clash between the White Army, monarchists and liberals, and the new power, the communists. Other conflicts as well grew intertwined during this period. They were ethnic and national, especially in the Ukraine and Caucasus, and social. The workers' unrest against the harsh living and working conditions was widespread.